Hi. I thought I'd talk a little bit about hyperlexia and what it is. So, hyperlexia is a term that, if used more often, it would help people understand essentially how someone could be both genuinely on the autistic spectrum as well as highly verbal. That's basically what hyperlexia is. To read the definition of hyperlexia, so hyperlexia is a precocity with language, reading in particular. In fact, it says here, hyperlexia is a syndrome that is characterized by a child's precocious ability to read, far above what would be expected for their age, significant difficulty in understanding and using verbal language, or a profound nonverbal learning disability, and significant problems during social interactions. So hyperlexia is essentially associated with autism. It pretty much it is. It's like could be almost a type of autism. Like I'd say hyperlexic autistic, someone who is definitely autistic but is precocious with their language skill. And that's a lot of people have a more difficult time understanding um, autistic people who are hyperlexic as opposed to autistic people who, it's kind of cut and dry when they have difficulty speaking. But for those autistics out there who are precocious in their speaking, people have a hard time understanding the nature of their language because it's still, although advanced, it's different. It's idiosyncratic. It's in a different context. So it says here, although hyperlexia may be the key symptom in describing the learning difference in a child, it is not a standalone diagnosis. Rather, it exists on a continuum with other disorders, such as autistic spectrum disorders, language disorders, and nonverbal learning disabilities. Children with hyperlexia may also exhibit other conditions, such as sensory integration, dysfunction, attention deficit, motor dyspraxia, obsessive compulsive, depression, and seizure. Children with hyperlexia are delightful, interesting, and challenging. How do we identify children with hyperlexia if they have other diagnoses or other conditions? The most important reason is that these children learn primarily through reading. So, the therapeutic and educational programs that we devise for them must take their reading skills into account. The reading skills of these children are their strength, and we use this strength to develop their weaker skills. Mary Freebed. She's a good example of someone who's hyperlexic. Mary has difficulty with mathematics and social stuff. Of course, she's brilliant and, one of a kind. I don't know how to describe her. I don't know how to describe me either. And a lot of autistic people are like that. So yeah, children with hyperlexia are delightful, interesting, and challenging. They have taught us about learning, language, and life. We have found that there are new concerns at each stage of development, and our work with these children is never done. Identification of hyperlexia is most important when children are young because early intervention increases children's chances for success. And since reading is a powerful tool for learning language and social skills, once a child begins to understand verbal language, written language can be gradually decreased and used only in certain situations when something new or confusing is introduced. This was very much me. I was a little girl that was totally autistic, and I learned most of what I know now through early reading. And I recognized letters very early. There's video footage of me on my second birthday reciting the alphabet and recognizing letters and reading small words. Yeah. And so, I mean, even though I am different with my language and I say things in weird contexts and I think I think differently. I I understand words like they're mathematics. It's weird. It's like I don't think verbally first. I think in sort of picture patterns and then the words slap onto them. So I sort of think verbally second. Like some people literally, Mary says she thinks in words first, but they're sort of, you know, chains of words. They link together and formulate sentences that make logical sense to her. Whereas me, I'm more creative. Like I see the picture patterns I and then I translate them quickly into language and into sentences. Reading was something that I did a lot of early on to basically learn what I needed to know about the world and about people. What's really interesting is that later on I didn't really like reading as much, but I still do like reading, but only in my special interest area. Like I have a really hard time reading things that are, like that I'm not interested in, that are mundane. Like I can soak up something really quickly if it's something I'm interested in and I need to know words and language, and I understand it for educational purposes, and I have to use my intellect to understand more abstract concepts. So, what's interesting about hyperlexia is I think it leads to cocktail speech in a lot of people. I mentioned that in that precocious video that I did, or when I was reading off the thing about the precocious um, term that I sort of informally coined. Basically, I speak to people outwardly, like based on my memorization of words and bodies of words and language in my mind. I use my working memory and my high interest areas that seem to have something in common with somebody else who has that high interest area when I need to make conversation, and I just, talk. But it's tiring for me because I have to use my intellect. I can't do it as inherently and as naturally as somebody else does it, somebody else who isn't on the autistic spectrum. And it is agonizing for me because I'm probably one of the more socially motivated autistic people that you'll meet. The only thing that really prevents me from socializing more is the fact that it takes me more energy, and because I'm also dealing with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I often am very tired and not feeling so great. I really have to be in a, a mode of having enough energy to do all that. So anyway, so about hyperlexia, I think probably a lot of hyperlexic people that are on the autistic spectrum are more socially motivated. Not necessarily, though. They could be more introverted, but a lot of hyperlexic people, I think, use their hyperlexia savant or precocity for the purpose of engaging with people. Oh, and speaking of, I was going to say, I have been reading more again since I got these glasses, because I went for a long time with with a weak prescription for my glasses, because I have a really bad prism in my right eye, especially. It basically, I have a lazy eye. What do you call it? Strabismus. And for a long time, it hurt my head to read too much, and it was a huge lack of motivation. But it's just so funny because I wasn't even sure I did what it was. I thought maybe I just started disliking reading more, and it was just that my prescription was getting way worse, and that also I hadn't for a long time, because of my autism and EDS pain, chronic pain and symptoms, had sort of missed the specific symptom of my eyes hurting more and having a harder time and being more stressed focusing on words. So that's like sensory integration. The sensory, I had a really hard time identifying and articulating to optometrists what my troubles were there. So I only recently was finally properly diagnosed with this prism thing to be as bad as it is, and needing these glasses, which are bifocals, by the way. Don't Don't make fun of me. I don't always use them, but they don't make contacts. They don't make contacts like this, so I can't use contacts. I hate contacts anyway. They're very annoying. But anyway, I've been reading more since I've been using these, and if I don't want to use them, like I just want to dress up and I don't feel like, if I just don't feel like wearing glasses because I don't think it suits the look, I just kind of cope with not wearing them and I dress up and don't wear them. So, but I don't do that. I usually do wear them now. And it is so much better. Like, I do still have the back of the head headaches from my neck, but I don't have the frontal headaches as badly. Anyway, just some rambling thoughts about hyperlexia. It's totally associated with autism. Yet, the stereotype of autistics being like lacking verbal ability remains. This article is talking about children. But what about adults? There's lots of hyperlexic autistic adults out there that are getting harshly misunderstood and pathologized. I can't, there are so many times when I have been pathologized and taken out of context for the things that I've said, and it's really hurtful and upsetting, because I say things in a different way, sometimes like a bold sort of verbose context gets me in shit, essentially. And or people really love it, or sometimes they really, really don't like it. And yeah, I end up in hot water for that. Like, an example is the things that I said around the people who ended up basically thinking or making this horribly gross misunderstanding of me that caused me to not have medical care for 3 years, after they accused me of horrible things just because of the ways that I was saying things, and it's a horrible frame, and it's just, I obtained my Freedom of Information files to read about the things that they were interpreting, and they were like, she claims that she says blah blah blah, and they put it in quotes, and they were just totally pathologizing it, um, and making it seem like a criminal thing. And it was just me, like, literally, it sounds like I'm quoting from a textbook sometimes. This is why doctors always, make pathology out of things that I say. Not always, actually. Like, and then, the really frustrating part is I try to explain that I'm on the spectrum, and they just refuse to accept it, as if they're only going to accept it if I were lacking ability to be verbal. Um, but I'm not always verbose. Sometimes my verbal abilities go down. Like, I get mutism, like selective mutism, if I'm really stressed or unwell. If I'm under a lot of stress or I'm frightened, my verbal abilities will either go down and I'll sound very childlike, and they'll often mistake that for me being like mentally unstable in some way, or I will sound like pathological to them because I can't be more natural in the way that I'm talking because I'm too stressed. So I'm literally scripting straight out of my technical memory, my working memory, and it sounds very technical. And so either way, I get the pepper spray, the proverbial pepper spray. So it's really hard because, it shouldn't be that hard. Um, I don't think my autism is like that, not not obvious, but people just seem to need to stick me in other categories, and it happens to a lot of hyperlexic autistic adults. That's my point. I'm just using my own experience as an example of this. When someone says that they're on the autistic spectrum and they're able to be chatty and verbal and verbose even, you have to consider that, they're just a hyperlexic autistic person. And therefore they have a precocity with their words, and a strong ability to intellectually, use language, but they are still autistic in many other ways in terms of grasping abstract concepts and thinking in a different way, in a more objective, just a different way that people don't necessarily understand unless it's explained to them. It's not a wrong way of thinking, but it's different. And combined with the different use of the divergent application of language sometimes, or the application of language to the divergent way of thinking, people really can really grossly misunderstand it. So the best thing that people like me can do is explain where we're coming from. And sometimes that does help a lot, and people do then get it, and they go, oh, I never thought about it that way. Okay.